Great Wednesday. This is King, and I'm here with my co-host Reggie Marr, and we're going to welcome to the Fully Human Connections podcast. And I tell you, Reggie, I look forward to these podcasts each week. Definitely take an excerpt from your book. But before we begin, let's begin with our normal process. Let's say what we're thankful for. So, Reggie, you want to go ahead and share that?
Yeah, so I'm just grateful for good health, relatively good health, and I'm especially grateful today because last week for about 48 to 72 hours I had a stomach virus, and yesterday I had a migraine headache, and both of those are rare occurrences for me, and they both really allowed me to appreciate what it's like not to have them, to just have my everyday good health. So I'm just grateful that for the most part, I get up every morning and things work the way they're supposed to, physiologically and mentally for me. So I'm just going, simple things, but sometimes I take them for granted. So I'm grateful for good health. Yeah.
I could definitely concur with that. As I always grateful for the fact that I'm alive, my health, my ability to see, hear, walk, talk, stand, breathe, and have a sound mind. Those are always my starting points for being grateful. Then, of course, roof over my head, my mother's still alive, being with me, and she has sound mind and good health. So those are always my cornerstones. And when it ended with, I'm grateful for the infinite possibilities that this day would bring. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where my gratitude is each and every day and how I end each and every night. And to me, that just keeps me in the right positions my mind to be in a very positive state and a very grateful state so to receive whatever the energy the universe brings my way. So, with that being said, so Rich, let's go ahead and kick off with our topic today. We're actually shifting from this week to a new topic from your book. And why don't you lead us into, again, for people who may be new to the podcast, your book title and then the topic we're going to be discussing today?
Yeah. Thank you, King. So the title of the book, which will be available in early October, if all stays according to plan, is Healing America's Narratives. And the subtitle is The Feminine, the Masculine, and Our Collective National Shadow. Um, and what the book basically does is it looks at the trajectory of the history of the United States and the pre-United States as it was being, as the what we now call the Americas was being colonized, explored, settled by Europeans. Um, Basically what's gone on in that geographic area that's now bordered on the north by Canada and the south by Mexico, that we call the United States of America. And the history informs the current affairs. So, the book really looks at is the mood of this country in this third decade of 21st century. So, I guess that's the general gist of the book. There's a lot going on in it. But today, at your suggestion, which I really appreciate, we're going to take a close look at a thread that begins with the very first chapter and is relevant throughout the book. And it's a phrase I refer to as cultural givens. And those are the things that each of us receives. And this is not just true for the United States. If you were a human being, you were born anywhere, when you were born, especially in your formative years, you were given things by your culture. To get really clear, the way I use that phrase, it includes everything from chronology. So it's different being born. I was born in 1954. Somebody born in 1994 was born into a different country than I was in many ways. Um, Geography makes a difference. I was born in Yonkers, New York, just atop of New York City. Somebody born in San Francisco or in Kansas City or in Miami or in I have cousins down in the Montgomery, Alabama area. So geography makes a difference because there's a different culture locally in different places. Right now I know you're sitting in Baltimore City.
Correct.
Um, so geography, chronology, but then more specifically, what our families give us. In my case, it was my parents were first generation Italian Americans, so my grandparents were immigrants. So I was a second generation Italian American Catholic, New York. So there were certain things that they believed back then in the late 50s and early 60s um, that were given as the truth, not as, well, here's one way we can look at things. This is what's true. You know, the one true Catholic Church, the greatest country in the world, and you know, what I laugh about now because the Yankees were the best team ever because they won more World Series. Right now, they're really struggling, even though they're in first place. That one's kind of like a little joke on the sides. But but seriously, we're all given something to believe in early on, and I believe that it's our ethical obligation as we grow older, you know, especially beginning in early adolescence forward, to question our cultural givens, not to just reject them out of hand, but to say, okay, how much of this really stands up in terms of my direct experience of living as a human being? So I might just further embrace my cultural givens. I might let some go. I might revise them slightly. Um, so anyway, so that's our topic today. For everybody who might ever listen to this podcast or who reads the book, it's not about my cultural givens, Reggie's or King's. It's about your cultural givens. To what extent is what you were given in your earliest years still holding up to self-reflection, critical thought, and genuine scrutiny? And to what extent do you need to let some of it go? So that's and that really informs what we need to do to heal the country, because there are a lot of us across the political spectrum who hold on to, in my view, certain perspectives that, given scrutiny, simply aren't true. And we have an obligation, if we want to be a moderately civil society and last for another few hundred years, to really examine these givens and make some shifts. So that was probably longer than it needed to be, but that's what we mean by cultural givens.
No, I definitely appreciate the context. So now, with that being said, and listening, and having a chance to kind of read your book, and also listen to your explanation of cultural givens, I see the importance of how that plays into our biases, and I think that's where I think most Americans. Now, I'm only going to speak for myself. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes. Most people always try to speak for other people, so I'm going to
Yeah.
really speak for myself in the context that I know that my cultural givens definitely colored my biases when it came to early on, when it came to how I viewed uh, people who had different sexual orientation. They were gay. I viewed them differently because of the cultural givens. How I viewed, I would say, white people in the context because of the community I was raised in and how the community felt at that time. And this is why I stress really the importance of personal development, because I wouldn't even take it to the point of I've talked to people even in the romantic relationships. I've seen um, women that I've dated in the past that have their cultural givens had, again, from my perspective, kind of inhibited us from being able to move forward. Because, see, one of the things that I didn't get into all of my things I'm grateful for, but one of the things that I'm always praying for on a daily basis is that I want to be a better person tomorrow than I am today.
Mm.
And I pray to be a better listener, and I go through a whole list of things that I pray to be better. But it's not just praying to be better, it's actually doing the actual actions behind it as well. And that's reading certain books, it's studying certain information, it's going through certain rituals. All that really helps me begin to think differently. And so much so that I've gone through so much personal development education since I was 20. And that's when I really began to get into this information, from the Anthony Robbins to again, Stephen R. Covey's. And that just led to a plethora of others along that thought of increasing my knowledge and bettering myself and understanding that true change comes from within and all those things that I can't even remember most of my childhood because I totally think differently than I did as before I got into that on this path. And I remember my first exposure to personal growth was Anthony Robbins' 30-day program. I forgot the name of it. I think it was Destiny of Change or something like that. But it was a 30-day program we get into 30 days. And he tells you, if you listen to this for 30 days and you do this time, you're going to be changed. And of course, I think most people, and I thought at the time that I meant like my life would change instantly
Hmm.
after I read it. That I was going to have riches and everything else in my life I wanted. But no, it's just that your thoughts change differently. And I began to consume information. I changed the way I thought about the information that I began to put into my mind and all those things. And so now, with all that being said, going back to cultural givens, most of the cultural givens that I had growing up, I'm totally so far from those that, it's hard for me even to understand when I go back and I talk to people in my community who's still there, who haven't done the personal growth that I've done, and they're still in that mindset to a certain extent. I can't even relate to them on any level. And I'm talking about close friends that, I grew up and they were childhood friends, but now we can't even talk no more than about 20 minutes before I have to I get bored of the conversation, or I'm just interested in the conversation, not bored just because of it's not in the direction I want to go in, but it's just disinterested because of the topics of where their mind is and where mine is totally different.
Yeah.
So that long soliloquy, I would say, is I look at culture givens as being one of the things that we can control, to your
Mhm.
point, based on your definition. And I think that's one of the things that when we look at how we really going to begin to start becoming fully human and identifying ourselves along the lines of being human beings, more so transcending the tribals of race, gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, political parties, and all these other things that we get separated and grouped into, and just say, what's in the best interest of humanity? And as a human being, what can I do to help you? And how can I connect to love? And that for me is always my constant quest, the questions I'm always asking myself. And that's where I believe is the path forward. So I believe this topic today, bottom line, is that as we begin to explore this over the next 3 weeks, um, our cultural givens should be the first thing that we tackle. And that's really the first chapter in your book, really, for the most part.
Mhm.
Uh, and I think that's the first thing we should tackle. So I just kind of, I know I threw a lot out there at you at that, but that's my question would be now. I want to throw a question at you. Where will you see the significance of bias as it relates to, and when I say bias, how we see other races, let's be specific on that first. Bias as we see other races, cultural givens playing a role in that, and how would you say that we can begin to make those necessarily shifts in our thinking as relates to that?
Yeah. So I love the question, and I love something that you said early in your, or you could refer to as your soliloquy, but it was for me it was spot on. Um, you used the word development, and development is something that I pay attention to throughout the whole book. And when I use that word, I'm specifically referring to, it's got to be 50 years now of longitudinal studies and research on adult development specifically. We've understood the development of, you know, in the womb and in early childhood and middle childhood and late childhood for much longer than that. You know, we understand childhood and adolescent development, but the idea of adult development is relatively new. Um, and so there's a lot of research on that, which I don't want to bog us down in that. Not that I'm articulate in every study, but a really good shorthand for the kind of development I believe you and I are speaking about has four moves in it. And again, the research suggests there's probably 6 to 8 more granular moves, but these four are basic. So the first is it's all about me. That's a me-centric, you might say egocentric view of the world. So you know, whatever happens, I only have concern for myself. And that's a necessary stage of development when we're young, because we have to individuate and become separate from our mothers and our mother figures. So
Hmm.
there's nothing wrong with that developmentally, but it can become unhealthy if that's the only view we ever have throughout our lives. So the next move is from it's about me to it's about us, right? And us may simply be, let's just play with this for a second. You know, you and I could have our own little club. So it's about me and King, right? And, you know, but typically the us is my family of origin, my brothers, sisters, parents. Maybe my religion gets included. Maybe my country gets included. Um, it can spread out much, you know, further. It can be my sexual orientation, my race, my skin pigmentation, my community, my anything, my corporate headquarters, my team, my branch of the service, right? My platoon or my brigade within that branch. So anything, anytime there's two or more people together, that's an us. That's a healthy move as well because it goes beyond just me and it now includes others. It can become unhealthy when it becomes us against them, as opposed to, oh, we have our little group and they have theirs, and we can get along with them, right? So the next move, and we're speaking as human beings now, that sounds goofy to say, but it's important to say. The next move after it's about us is it's about all of us. And in that phrase, as we're using it, meaning all human beings. And that's what you were pointing to. Um, so it doesn't mean I can no longer be a Buddhist or a Catholic, or I'm no longer white or black, or I'm no longer Italian or Irish or whatever, pick one. That I'm no longer a member of this company or this community group. I can still do that, but my primary identification is, oh, all of these human beings at some level are just like me. Not the way they look, not the way they speak, not their aspirations or their talents necessarily, but they're human. They're the
Mm.
same species. And that changes everything. And very, very few human beings on the planet today live in that space. The majority of us live in it's about us, some kind of a group, whether it's religion, nation, political party, whatever. The majority of us, and there's research on this, I'm not making that up. Um, a lot more people can espouse it's about all of us and speak it, but really don't live there. Um, and then the last step is from it's about us, excuse me, it's about all of us. The last step is it's about all that is. So I identify as being part of the universe, being part of creation. So I have more respect for um, plants, animals, trees, all of it. So everything that we have in contact with. I don't want to start polluting the moon if we, continue to travel to the moon. I don't want to put more debris up there because even though it seems like it's a vast space, and it is, we've learned how quickly we can, pollute our little planet here. So the move from about me to about us to about all of us, about all that is, that's a good shorthand for development. And the goal, at the very least, is to be healthy at each of those stages. It's better to have a healthy, it's about me, than an unhealthy, it's about us. Because the unhealthy, it's about us, pick an example. The European explorers, kidnappers saw the Africans and said, oh, that's a different us, and we're superior to them. So they kidnapped them and enslaved them. They arrived to the Americas and they met the Tainos and the Iroquois and the Seminoles and the different native peoples in this country. They said, oh, another us, and we're better, we're superior. So they massacred, betrayed, and stole land from them. I mean, I'm painting with broad brushstrokes here, obviously.
Right.
So better to be healthy at a me-centric view than unhealthy and us-centric. Because look at the world wars, look at any war that's ever been started by anyone. It was begun through an unhealthy iteration of us-centrism. Right? Russia goes into Ukraine. Japan attacks Pearl Harbor. The United States attacks Iraq in 2003. All of that is an us-centric on a national level perspective. So that was, um, you know, the importance of development. And to your question, uh, that remains our issues with whether it's race, gender, sexual orientation. It's this othering of people who are different, as you said, growing up. I mean, when I was, you mentioned that you were, taught to, whether it was implicitly or explicitly taught, to view people who were, gay as different. Um, when I was a kid, the games I was taught and the TV shows I would watch depicted cowboys as the good guys and Indians as the savages. And that was the language of it. Cowboys good, Indians bad. Now, you know, so let me put a pause there because I could go off on other examples. I want to just bring that back home. So most of us, at least, in most generations, who we choose to other shifts, but every generation of cultural givens has some others that they say are different or inferior to themselves. I don't know of any generation that doesn't have some version of that. And if somebody knows a generation that came in pure with a healthy embrace of everyone, um, I'd like to know what generation that is. Not an individual family here or there, perhaps, or an individual person. Yeah, undoubtedly, but a generation. I don't know of anything like that. So we have work to do.
Absolutely,
I don't know
absolutely.
if I got the question at all, but it was in the
I,
ballpark.
I, no, no, it was, and it was a lot to unpack there. As I was listening to you, I know that you referenced this before, and I know you referenced this in your book as well. The dealing with our shadow, and that comes from Carl Jung,
Yeah.
and as you talked about the four types, I was thinking about his four archetypes and how similar that is to, you start off as the a warrior, I mean athlete, then I'm sorry, and then the warrior, then the statesman, then the spirit, and then on those same lines of that me, then us, then the greater, you should say, what the next one was, me,
All of
us, all of us, and then including everything else in society, the worldview. And I've always focused my life, once I read that his book, of growth, in the context that the maturity continuum growth of going from that, starting off as the athlete. I mean, everything's about my body, everything's about my physical. How do I look? And you go through that, and we go through that phase where, and I know a lot of people still stuck there, and I can tell how they value things, and what's important to them is still their physical looks. Then you go from there to now you want to compete with everybody. So now it's the warrior, it's me against the world, and I got to get this job over you, and everything is in competitive mode. And that's why I think we like teams so much, because the teams gives us that ability to, my team against your team. I remember growing up with my friends, and I grew up in a neighborhood of maybe 10 kids, and then I have a brother as well, and we all chose football teams at an early age,
them.
and none of us could choose the same team. We couldn't like the same team. We all had to choose different teams just so that we could be rivals. And to this day, my brother and I don't like the same teams, and we won't like the same team because of that culture of giving, so to speak. So now, with that being said, my goal has always been moving on. So from that warrior, I went through the warrior phase like everyone else does, until I got to the point of the statesman phase. And that's where I think where now I'm in that space now. And that's where the whole conscious movement that I'm a part of is, where you say that there's a greater good. And I want to care, I'm more concerned about how my actions impact society and the world. And I want to make the world a better place. And I can see that I have an opportunity to make the world a better place, or at least my community to start with. And that's when that statesman mindset comes into play. And so now, with that being stated, I think a person has to have that initial interest in that personal growth and the development. And that's why I see a lot of people lack. And I'm not, again, not just talking about from a bias of being racial bias. I'm talking about just from a context of going through that maturity continuum that I'm talking about. A lot of people are still stuck with I'm talking about being 50 years old and still not in a successful romantic relationship, even though they want to be in a relationship. I'm going to kind of shift the focus there now, talk about how culture givens impact our ability to build relationships, period, whether romantic, personal, professional, or what have you. And I can listen to a person tell me about all the reasons why um, they feel as though there's no good men out there in the world. Like there's no more good men that exist, and they're giving all these reasons. And I remember there's a quote, and I forgot who to contribute this quote to, but they said that we judge ourselves by our intentions, others judge us by our actions, you
Mhm.
know. And so I listened to this person I was having a conversation with, and they were talking about how good they are and what they wanted in the relationship. Like, I want to be able to do this, I want to be able to do this, I want my mate to bring all this to the table, right? And my question for them was, well, what are you going to bring? And then they didn't have an answer for that. They had never even thought about that. It was just like they were looking at all they were going to receive because
Mhm.
their culture givens had taught them that. And they had to sit back and think about that. And they said later on, this is months later, that conversation stayed with them because there was a paradigm shift in their mind. They had never thought about what to bring a relationship, right? And I have that same mentality with all the relationships I bring. Again, whether they're personal or professional, I'm a giver. In the context, I believe that's a great way of building a relationship is to give first. I think it's a great way of vetting people because if you give first and then the person you're giving to is someone who's a taker, then you'll quickly see that because they'll just keep taking, taking, taking. Where
Yeah.
most people, just use a quick analogy, if you go to a bar and you with, I don't know if you drink or not, but if you with colleagues or whatever and your friends and everyone's at the bar and the bill comes around and it's the first round, someone say, I'll take this. And that's when, that starts a cycle where,
Yeah.
everybody should give a round if depending on how much you're drinking. And then you feel wrong if you don't. You say, okay, well, next time I'm starting off the round, right? But if you with that person who never puts it, they call them the alligator arms. When it comes to reaching for the check, they never put their arm out there. It's too short. Then they let you know that's a taker. Now I'm going through that because I believe that as we talk about again, with the goal to build fully human connections and connecting with yourself first, it's really committed to that personal growth, and then saying to yourself, what are going to be my initial behaviors when I begin to interact with people? Like, and then I'll end this my point with this. That's a quote that Lincoln, and I might not say it correctly, but it's Lincoln had a quote that says, "I don't like that man. I gotta get to know him better." You know what I'm saying? And that mentality says it all. It's like, yeah, I don't like you because I have these biases because my culture given tells me here's all the reasons why I shouldn't like you: color your skin, your sexual orientation, your gender, you know, your city. Like you said before, it's like I was thinking about this other day, how we can continue to further divide ourselves, separate ourselves, and I call them tribes. You
Yeah.
can say, okay, I'm a black man, but then I'm a black man in the United States, so I'm different than black men in Europe. But then I'm a black man in the United States that's in Maryland, so I'm different than black man in the United States in Houston, Texas. Then I'm a black man in the United States that lives in Baltimore, so now I'm different than one who lives in Cleveland. Then I'm a black man in the United States that's um, living in West Baltimore, and I'm different than ones that live in East Baltimore. And I can further keep. Then I can say my age. I'm a black man in the United States that's, in its 50s, so I'm different than the ones in their 30s. So to your point, if we want to just keep playing this us, me role, we can really drill down to a very microscopic level.
Yeah.
But I love what you said to kind of encompass that was, but we got to have a healthy relationship with that.
Yeah.
That's what I think it starts when you have a healthy relationship with me. Then you say, how can I become better? That's what I believe. I just kind of wanted to see, do you, from that healthy relationship with me, will you say is that the emphasis or starting point for growth? Is by having a healthy relationship? Because if you don't have a healthy relationship with you might not pursue the growth path.
Yeah, I mean that first I love that you inserted the importance of relationship into this conversation, but I want to just give a very powerful yes to that last question you asked. If we don't learn, and I don't think most of us really learn how to practice self love, to love ourselves when we're very very young. I think some people do. I don't think a
Right.
lot of us do. I think we
Right.
have to learn that. But I firmly believe that if we don't have a healthy sense of me first, it's impossible. And this is something I'm not making this piece up. It's impossible to have a really healthy relationship with another if I don't have a healthy relationship with myself first. I can be in relationship. I can kind of date somebody or even marry somebody or whatever, but the odds of it going deeper and deeper in a healthy way are reduced by the fact that I haven't done that with myself yet. And there's everyone from spiritual teachers like Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk who died at the beginning of this year, to um, I'll just stay with him for now because there's other examples of it. They're all really clear that until each of us is healthy with ourselves, um, we can't be fully healthy with others. And relationship is the ideal place for growth because it requires us to make the move in its healthiest iteration from it's about me to it's about us. Let's just make believe for a second as just these two people, whatever the nature of the relationship is, work, social, familial, parent, child, husband, wife, doesn't matter what it is. Um, it doesn't mean I no longer care about myself. It means that I'm subordinating in a healthy way me to us. So again, you get into a relationship, you don't say, oh, I don't need to take care of myself anymore or continue developing because now I have this relationship. No, that's getting it wrong. What happens is the us becomes primary. Now I'm in this relationship. I'm dedicated as a spouse or a parent or a coworker, whatever it is. I still take care of myself, though. I still develop the me part of me, um, but it's no longer primary. And in the absence of that, I mean, so I'm just going to reinforce it as you asked the question. Absolutely. You don't take care of yourself, you're going to be of less good to the rest of us. Um, and you also said something I want to kind of shine a light on. All of these things we're speaking about, because you mentioned the archetypes of the athlete, the warrior, the statesman, and the spirit. I think everything can manifest, in my experience of the world, the masculine, the feminine, the different archetypes. It's about me, it's about us, about all of us, all that is. Any one of those can manifest in a healthy way or in an unhealthy way. And so just because you're living in the it's about all of us stage, which is it's less likely to be unhealthy there for a lot of reasons, but it's still possible. At that stage, you can become very anthropocentric. So only human beings count.
Mm.
And it's all about human beings. And that makes it easier to chop down trees and pave over the natural world because we're taking care of humanity. So any iteration, excuse me, any of these characterizations, developmental or archetypal that we're talking about, can show up in a healthy way or an unhealthy way. So we always have to check in and say, okay, how am I doing as a warrior or as a statesman or in my us-centric view? Am I healthy there? Or am I kind of going towards the unhealthy iteration of it? So it sounds complex, but if you start paying attention to it, it's actually pretty straightforward. Um, and it gets increasingly more complex the more of an embrace you have. Me is the most simple. It's about me. Right? Nothing else to worry about. Take care of me. As soon as I open up to an us, that's more complex. There's more moving parts in an us because it might be just me and you, or me and my religion, or me and my company, or me and my whatever. And then when it's all of us, me and my species, that's really complex because our species is beautifully and amazingly diverse across everything, size, shape, color, aspiration, talent, able-bodiedness. I mean, we're just so, humans are such a rich um, creature, a rich group of beings. And to the extent that we're able, we need to say, oh, everybody's got a belly button or a navel. That's where we were connected to our mothers. So we all have that in common. And that unity of having that in common is so important in the light of all the diversity because, we have this connection to this mother and we were all brought into the world as these helpless infants. We're one of the species that, and I don't know enough about biology to start, or zoology to name which animals do and don't, but leave a human infant alone, it dies.
Right.
Right? There's some animals where they get born, bang, they're on their own. So, by nature, we have to have relationship. We need that care giver, whether it's a mother figure, a nurse, a midwife, a doctor, whomever, at birth. So relationship is essential to our survival. Whether we call them tribes, groups, communities, um, essential to our survival as a species, I would say.
Yeah, I think about when you talk about a healthy relationship with where you are if, in your different development stages. So my question would be, this might be a subset or a characteristic of healthy, is being happy with yourself or being happy. Like for me, whether again going back to relationships, whether it's romantic, whether it's professional, being happy, I don't want to deal with someone who's not happy, right? And I think the mistake is a lot of people make when it comes to romantic relationships is believing that they're a person will bring them happiness outside of that. That's another whole conversation about relationships and that. But as we talk about healthy relationship with yourself, I just want to kind of really bring that back to, would happy be a characteristic of that? So if you're happy with yourself, would you say that that's the either the start of having a healthy relationship with yourself, or does that define what being having a healthy relationship with yourself is being happy?
Yeah, that's a really important and good question, and I want to just tease it apart a little bit. So I believe, yeah, if I believe my direct experience. I'm not an expert on happiness, but my direct experience of happiness is it resides in me. It can be supported and perhaps enhanced or adversely impacted by external experiences and people. But if I don't have it in me first,
Mm.
um, anything I get from other people is going to be ephemeral. It's going to be superficial. It's just not going to. It's not going to last. So I think it needs to be there. Um, the, the the slippery part of happiness for me is, um, in terms of being happy with myself. I think there are people on the planet who are in fact happy with themselves, who do a lot of damage to others. They like their lives, they like who they are, and the nature of what they do is it's purely transactional, and it uses other people for their own gain, for one's gain. So I don't know that just being happy with oneself is enough, because a person comes to mind, I'll just say, I look at someone like Donald Trump, and I don't want to, I'm not getting into political stuff here, but I've been aware of him since he was in his 20s, because I grew up, you know, a couple of subway stops from where he grew up. And he was in the news in the New York area when he was a young heir, 20, 25, 30 years old, whatever. And he seems happy with himself, but he seems to be doing a lot of damage to a lot of people.
Well, let me jump in on that real quick
Yeah,
because
please.
that was going to actually he was going to be my point. I was going to bring up of someone who, again, not to be political, but just talking about his behaviors, right?
Yeah.
That I don't see him as being happy. That's where I was going to go with this. He seems like he's not happy. Now he may be content. He may be a narcissist. He may be believe that he's better than other people and all those things, right? But I've never seen him smile. Like he doesn't seem like he walks in, he's just having a great day. It's like he's always at war, and it's either he's
Yeah.
taking things personal, he has this grievance with this person. So now again, that appeals to certain other people because they want their leaders to, come out and go to war for them. But that I was going to say that was my exact point, is that I can look at anybody throughout history. And again, I know I haven't seen them in every instance. I haven't talked to these people personally. I'm just saying from the images that I see, either on TV or photographs, where you take someone like Hitler, you take someone like Donald Trump, you take someone who has known to have a negative impact in the world from
Mm-hmm.
most people's perspective. They never seem happy. I never seen Hitler smile. I mean, he may be smiling in a speech because he's tap into the energy of the audience and the crowd that he's speaking to. But still, overall, I've never read about any time they said he was just a happy person that was just by himself, and he was just happy with life and he enjoyed life. It's like
Yeah.
their souls are missing something, and that's where the power grab and that quest for more power comes from, because there's a void there, and I believe that's happiness in my personal assessment. Again, I could be totally wrong. There's no data to back it up. It's just that that's my personal assessment, and I see that with people who I on a more personal level that I deal with on a day-to-day basis that can be very successful in business. They can be very financially successful, but I can look at them and I can tell that they're not happy. They're not happy with how they're living their lives. They have a quest to. It's always the next contract, or it's the next proposal, or it's the next building to buy, or it's the next book to publish, or it's the next movie to do, or whatever their profession may be.
Right.
It's always the next one. They're never satisfied, and it's always happiness is always external, and it always eludes them. For my, that's why my question was being healthy. Would that be a synonym for being happy? Because I believe if you're health, if someone's happy, let's say for example, Mother Teresa, right? Now, from all intents and purposes, every book I read about her, everybody who encountered her, said she always had a smile. She's always very warm spirited. It was
Mhm.
always a transformational experience. Just having a conversation with her, being in her presence was always something that you walked away feeling more enlightened, more fulfilled. And that to me, I think is the ultimate connection of being fully human. Is you make that first connection to yourself, where people feel as though there's something different about you, the way you're operating, the way you're, the energy that comes from you. I want to be connected to that, and as a result of being connected to that in a short period of time, I felt different from being in your presence.
Yeah. Yes, no, I really appreciate everything that you just said. Now, what I want to do is walk back my suggestion that Donald Trump might be happy. I don't, you know, I think that happy wouldn't be the right word for him. So I really appreciate, that you commented on that. He might be stuck in a way of doing things that he's been doing based, taught by his father and Roy Cohn probably. Um,
Mm-mm.
that this is the way the world is. So you just do it this way and you just never relent and you lie and you repeat the lie and you just keep on going and you never look back. You don't reflect. You just keep on going. So he probably wasn't a good no, not probably. Let me be really clear. He wasn't a good example of being happy. But you said so. Maybe he's content with himself, but I would say he just doesn't know any other way. Um, so I think the idea of being, if someone is truly happy, and again, I don't know what a good definition of happiness is. I just don't, I'm sure there's some out there that are good. I don't know one off the top of my head. I'm not going to pretend to know. But I think the idea of being truly healthy wherever one is would definitely be a foundation, if not a part of happiness. So I agree with you. I think that that's true. Mother Teresa was a great example. Um, Thich Nhat Hanh, again, who died. I think he had surpassed 90, and he was a refugee from his country, Vietnam. They both the North and the South kicked him out because he protested the war in 1966. And as a refugee, he went around the world and built monasteries, and he was very tuned into the suffering everywhere. But he always had a smile. I mean, always. I mean, he regularly was smiling, and he could articulate why he was smiling. So I agree with you that there was this sense of being okay, not in denial of the reality of what's going on in the world at large, but being okay with myself and with others, where I can, you know, recognize that I can't snap my fingers and fix everything, but I can show up every day taking care of myself and others in a healthy way, and I can be happy with that. So I agree. I mean, I really appreciate the way you turn that a little bit, and dealt with my example of Trump. So yeah, I think there's a definite healthiness in happiness, or a definite happiness in healthiness. I don't know which way to even say it, but I think
And,
there's a connection. Yeah.
and again, going back to Trump, and again, not talking about from a political standpoint. I remember when Trump was doing his reality TV show, The Apprentice, which my brother loved that show, and I liked a couple episodes, and I took some ideas from it because he had a wonderful idea where he would take celebrities and he would challenge them to go out to raise capital, to go out and do good things, to do um, philanthropic activities for different nonprofits, right? So even though he was doing something good in that context, and it was a entertaining show, and it was a very successful show, he still didn't seem happy. You
Hmm.
know, even within that space, right? Even though he was doing good, he wasn't as looked at now where he has such much, but people view him in a negative light because of what he's doing. Even in that context, he didn't seem like a happy person, and that's why I'm saying is that uh, I believe that, and this would be my advice to others that's listening to the show is first figure out what it's going to take to make you happy, right? And I know I went through that phase myself, and I would say right now I'm happy. I'm a happy individual with my life, you know. And it's not that I don't have problems, you know. Problems. I think as long as you're alive, you're gonna have problems. You know, you wake up out of bed, your knee aches. You know what I'm saying? Your back may hurt. You know, so it's never
Hmm.
gonna be a world where you just get up and it's birds flying around you. There's a perfect temperature outside, and everything is just pleasant.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that doesn't define happiness. Happiness to me has been understanding, like starting off with a gratitude, right? I think when you start off with a grateful mindset, that's why we start our show off the way we do, is we start off with that context. I find it's hard to be unhappy once you go through that list and you recognize here's the things that I'm blessed with, here's the things I'm thankful for, right? And it's hard to sit here and say, well, once I say all that, well, here's what I would really love to have, and this is why I'm not happy with my life, right?
Hmm.
So that's why I look at what can I do to better understand how to build relationships, how to build connections. First, it starts with connecting with myself, and I think that's where I think it's paramount. But then, as I connect with other people, I'm looking to see if their energy is eluding. First of all, are they smiling when I connect with them?
Hmm.
Right? That's like you're smiling now, right? If a person doesn't smile throughout a conversation, that's a telltale sign that this person's not happy. And I can in business, I've learned the painful lesson that this person may have the funding I'm looking for, because in real estate, you're constantly looking for funding, you're looking to make deals happen. And this person may not, I mean, have all those things when I meet them, and I've been wanting to meet them. I read their bio on LinkedIn, and then I get in their presence, and it's like this person's doesn't smile. That's what they said about Rockefeller. You study Rockefeller, right? Arguably the richest man richest American that ever existed. And they would say if you sat in a room with him, he was always quiet. He would never really engage with people. And the few people who did engage with said that his thought process was always mechanical, always thinking, and he never really seemed happy within himself. And he to this day goes down as arguably, if I'm sure somebody might bring some other data of where Elon Musk is, but he was the richest man, richest person to ever, in America for sure. So I just want to just kind of really drill down on what I feel is that let's get to the point of how to pursue happiness, right? And I think that comes from really understanding you, and it's not going to come from anything external. I went through that. Material gifts, money, financial success, career success is not going to make you happy. It has to be something that's deeply embedded in your spirit first and foremost, because you could be poor and be happy.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you went there because I'm going to just use slightly different language to say that. I'm going to try to say the same thing. I mean, one of my teachers, Bill Plotkin, refers to the soul, capital SOUL, when he uses it, as one's unique place in the world, or he uses another phrase, one's unique ecological niche. In other words, so the soul is where, your soul, King, is where you belong. In other words, what you were designed to do, basically. And how you were designed to be is probably even a better way to say it. Same thing is true for me. And it's different from a job description. And going back to cultural givens, at least when I was born, I mean, the trajectory for human life was grow up, go to school, get your education, maybe, meet somebody, first get a job, make some money, meet somebody, get married, buy a house, have kids, and live happily ever after. There was never any instruction or even a hint about, you know, find out what it is that your soul or the deepest part of you longs for, where you truly belong in the overall scheme of things. As Howard Thurman, this is attributed to him, where he basically said, don't worry about what the world needs. Find what brings you alive and go do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And there's other great quotes like that. So I agree 100% that if I get up in the morning and I have I don't have to be 100% crystal clear, but I have a good sense of who I am and where I belong in the larger scheme of things, it's really easy to be happy. It's also possible to make billions of dollars at a job or as an entrepreneur and not be doing the thing you were put here to do. So
Right.
it's easy to, I mean, I'm not a good example of somebody for whom it was easy to make money because I was a Catholic school teacher and a poet. Um, but those aren't two particularly lucrative places to go. But it is, if you just want to make money and you're moderately intelligent, you can do it. Right? You can do it. Different ways you can do it. Not saying become a billionaire, but you can do it. But finding your unique ecological niche, the place where I belong, where you belong, where anyone belongs, and growing into that, and then finding ways to deliver it to the world. I mean, that's like the ideal life, because you're in the right place, and you don't have to search for happiness. Then happiness arises because you're being your authentic self. So
Absolutely.
that's my take on what you upside. That was my way of agreeing with you. I just put some different language around it. Um,
Absolutely. And I remember the movie that Bill Smith played in that probably arguably my favorite movie that Will Smith played in was The Pursuit of Happiness.
oh yeah, yeah,
He talks about, it's the pursuit of happiness, right?
yeah.
But I think that the problem with people becoming happy is that they allow the media and society to tell them what defines happiness for them. And it's always something external because they want you to be a consumer.
Hmm.
So, and like I said, I went through that when I was, when I really started being successful early in my career and started making more money financially. I felt that when went from making $20,000 to making $80,000 like in 2 years, that a person who makes $80,000 doesn't drive the same kind of car that a person who makes 20 doesn't eat at the same restaurants and food, doesn't wear the same clothing. So I went out and started trying to go out and live what I felt was a person who makes $80,000 a year lifestyle,
Hmm.
and didn't make me happy.
Hmm.
And I was more depressed. I was making more money than I've ever made in my life at that time, and I was depressed, and it was because I realized that happiness comes from within, and I had to really connect and really to know myself. And I would say the way I became happy was connecting to my purpose, and that's what makes me happy. Once I discovered what my purpose was in life, and truly begin to connect to that, and then begin to live that, and it's an ongoing journey, right? And that's one of the things I tell folks, that I refuse to have a bad day.
Hmm.
I may have bad moments in my day, right?
Right.
But I refuse to end my night without doing something, because I know what will make me happy. And it's usually going to be some form of servitude, some form of helping someone else before the day ends. And as long as I do that, then I can say, well, I didn't have a bad day. And that's my quest, right? Regardless of the fact I might wake up and my car might be stolen, or someone broke in my house, or I might be sued for this, or I might have, all the negative things that can happen are
Yeah.
going to happen. But for me, it's not going to change my happiness. And that's why I read books like, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, right?
Hmm.
That to me, when he talks about being in a concentration camp and still keeping your soul, your humanity, and your dignity, and that, and the gravest of circumstances like that, that to me, if he can do that, that's someone I want to learn from. I want to read his thought process and his methodology and his ideology and what he did to stay in that path. And the more I read, and I want to end this on this point, it goes back to the analogy of the big cat and the little cat, or the older cat and the younger cat. and this cat is in an alley, and the older cat sees this younger cat chasing his tail, and he asks the younger cat, "What are you doing?" He said, the cat said, "Well, I was told my happiness is in my tail, so I'm chasing my tail to get the happiness." And the older cat said, "I too was told that happiness is in my tail, so when I walk, happiness follows me." You
Mm.
know, so I just think it's about a perspective shift in that context.
Yeah, I had not. I don't think I have heard that before. I like that. I'll definitely be stealing that. The cats, two
Well, that's
cats.
Wayne Dyer, Dr. Wayne Dyer. I got that
Okay.
from him, so I can't take credit for that either.
Yeah, yeah, I like that one. Yeah,
Any closing? Well, so we're getting to the point we're getting to the top of the hour, so
yeah,
I guess it's to the point where we need to go through and suggest who we feel is another example of a human being, whether it's past or present, who we feel is exhibiting or has exhibited fully human connections that we can now say this is a person that exhibits a model of being a fully human that we're espousing or advocating through our show today.
yeah, yeah. So I'm actually going to go with somebody I just mentioned earlier in the conversation. Thich Nhat Hanh passed away in January of 2020, um, and he was he came to this country in the early 60s. He was a Fulbright scholar. He was at Princeton and Columbia universities. But when when the United States really got involved more deeply in Vietnam, he protested against the war, against all sides, against the North, against the South, and against the United States, and was, again, became a refugee. And he was allowed back in his country after 30 some odd years. But what he did in the meantime was he founded monasteries throughout Europe and the United States, and he regularly did mindfulness retreats in this country, open to everyone, but also focused very specifically on war veterans, Vietnam War veterans, and even you know post 9/11 war veterans as well. So just a real grounded, peaceful man, um, who just gave to the world throughout his life, and he died surrounded by his supporters in the same monastery outside of Hue in Vietnam, that he had entered when he was 16 years old. So he's just a global hero for me. Yeah.
Absolutely, I can see that. And I just kind of, before I go give mine quickly, I just want to piggyback off last week. I said Lyndon Baines Johnson was.
Yeah.
And I know I got some pushback from some folks who said, well, what about Vietnam and all the things like that? And I just want to make sure people understand I'm not saying these people are perfect.
Right.
What I'm defining someone as he took a stand against something that was against the norm. It caused great sacrifice and he brought about change. And that's what I'm looking at as my definition of somebody fully human. I think as long as you're a human being in your life, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to do things that's going to not make people happy. So now, with that being said, my choice today would be the late great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who I feel is someone who definitely exhibited being fully human because he showed the world humanity and he advocated and he gave his life for that. Because even with studying my research on Johnson, him and Johnson were allies until he started speaking against the war. And now that also caused that issue. That's what I'm saying. When you stand up for something because you know it's just, not because it's popular, that is the true definition of someone as being fully human. Everybody knows the great work Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did, so I don't need to go through all his accolades and his successes. It's just that he's someone who I believe if you look at how to begin to make changes in your life, it starts with idolizing and studying people who've made change. And he's arguably one of the key people who brought about change in our lifetime for sure.
Yeah.
So with that being said, Reggie, we've reached 11 o'clock, which is our hour of end of our show. So I want to thank you again for your investment of time and again for writing the book that you've written and bringing an insightful conversation that we have had today. And
My pleasure, King, and I always thank you for inviting me onto the podcast, and I enjoy our conversations every week. So I'm deeply grateful for you and for this platform as well.
And for listening audience, thank you for joining in, listening to For the Human Connections. And until next Wednesday at 10 a.m., let's all look for ways we all can continue down the path of making more fully human connections. Thank you all.